All right. Okay, so our panel right now is going to be about customer advisory boards. How do you start a customer advisory board from nothing? How can you make sure to effectively execute on that programming and find customers that are willing to participate and also get value back from the program? So up here we have Annalisa from Filevine, Katie from, I'm missing on my doc. iCIMS, and then Mindy
From MoveWorks.
MoveWorks, perfect. So would love to hear a little bit from each of you at your companies, how you how you currently have a customer advisory board program.
Yeah, sure.
How I have it?
Or how long have you have it? When did you
okay.
spin it up? Yeah. Do you?
Yeah, so I'm Annalisa. I'm at Filevine, and I was the first customer marketing hire there. And so one of the goals with my job description and what my boss brought me on to do was launch a CAB. And so we launched it last September at our annual client conference. And so I meet with them quarterly, so it's not quite a year yet, but it's been fun. And prior to that, I ran a CAB with Morgan Stanley.
Awesome. Katie, how about you? What's your background and CAB story?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Katie Meeker, Director of Customer Marketing at iCIMS. iCIMS helps organizations attract, engage, hire, and advance talent. I have been with iCIMS for 13 years, and I've been doing customer marketing for about 12 of those years. I'm just so happy to be with my people here and find other customer marketers, because it was very lonely for a long time. But I've been doing CABs, for about 10 years. We've done a ton of different versions of them. I think COVID obviously threw us a curveball of how do we take our CAB and make it virtual, and then now that folks want to be in person again, how do we take a hybrid approach to our CABs? Made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think we're in a good place now, so looking forward to chatting with you all.
Great. I'm Mindy Lyons Blackstock. I'm head of customer marketing at MoveWorks. MoveWorks is an AI platform that powers some of the best companies out there, but in the employee support space. So if you are wondering how much PTO you have left, or how do you procure, the latest tooling over there, you can go through this bot and learn how to do that at your company. We're in a crazy growth period with the organization. I think I was around employee number 300, and we are over 700 now, after just 9 months of being there. And similarly, I was hired to start up the CAB. So we have had 2 CAB meetings so far. I'm just coming off of my first hybrid one, and it's quite a journey. And I would just say, a CAB is a journey. For anyone who hasn't tried yet, it is a journey.
Well, I'm really interested in hearing more about that journey. Would you all be able to touch on reasons for starting and investing in a CAB, a customer advisory board, in the first place? I think, sometimes as customer marketers, the teams that we work with, or even our directors, they hear words sometimes and they're like, yeah, go ahead, do that. We need that. So how would you define the importance of a CAB and what value it can give back to a company?
Yeah, I can start. So I had some very hyped up senior leadership. I was like, go, get a CAB. I'm like, can you even tell me what a CAB is? So I had to do a lot of pre-work, I guess, to map out what our actual goals were. So is it a product one? Is it a strategic one where these people are maybe paid and they act almost as an extension of the board? Are we just looking to get them to network and kind of use it as an advocacy base, or a technical one? So did a lot of research, kind of mapped everything out for them to get some more ideas there. We landed somewhere a little bit in the middle, so we treat them where we give them information from everything from go-to-market to customer experience to product as well. Did that answer the question? I think so.
Yeah, it sounds like you started from a similar place of,
Yeah.
you know, your team being like, go get a cab,
Yeah,
and
they're-
then being able to ground them in that value. How about you, Katie, and then we'll go to Mindy. When your company was originally looking at starting a cab or investing a cab, what was the main reason behind that, the value that they were hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, similar to Annalisa, it was just start a cab. And like I mentioned, I've been doing this for quite a few years, so made a lot of mistakes along the way. But when we brought back our cab again, I was very adamant about aligning on what the goals were up front. Are the goals voice of the customer? Cool, great. That should be a tenet of your cab. Is your goal engagement with key strategic customers? Could also be a goal of your cab. Is your goal advocacy? Are these going to be your new pool of customers that you can go to for speaking engagements? Maybe. It's worked well for us. So aligning on what the goals of the cab were very important as we restarted, and also finding that executive alignment. My VP at the time told me that our cab was a boondoggle, and I Googled what a boondoggle was because I wasn't sure. And a boondoggle is something that appears to have value but does not. And so once I Googled that and realized what she was telling me, I said, we need to realign on who our executive sponsor is for this cab. So we did, and the chief customer officer was really the right person to realign with and partner with cross-functionally and make sure that we had the same goals and we understood what we wanted to get out of the cab, so that it was not a boondoggle, but instead something that provided a lot of value back to the organization.
Awesome, and we'll definitely be able to dig into more details there for what that programming looks like. How about you, Mindy? When your company was investing in a cab or originally rolling it out, what was the main value you were trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, sure. So I think sort of similarly, heard the buzzword, let's do it, and then it's like, okay, well, what is it? And I think, as customer marketers, we're very used to cross-functional alignment. You're probably going to hear me say alignment about 20 times while I'm up here. One of the things that I did do, in addition to all the whiteboarding sessions, in addition to making sure my leadership and I were aligned on what we want this to be, was I also got feedback from a core group of strategic customers. So I did a preliminary survey as well as some interviews to see what they wanted. So I had 8 folks who I call my founding members who gave me that initial feedback on why would they want to be in the room. I mean, these are executives who do not need any more reasons to travel or congregate with people in their industry. They don't need any more reasons for any of that. So what are things that we would be doing that would make this a valuable experience to them? And so we started really mapping that out with them as we were also building it kind of internally to make this valuable on sort of both sides.
Yeah, again, I love that, design, human-centered design approach, making sure it works for everyone. What were the main values? Why did they show up to the cab?
Yeah, sure. So a big piece of what we wanted to do was drive executive programming. So this is really, our cab right now is really focused at the executive level. So it's me in the room with a bunch of C-levels, and these folks are coming together to really learn from each other. So there's inspiration. So there's that sort of best in breed. Best practices that they gain from each other. There's thought leadership. So, there is an opportunity for them to, deliver sessions on thought leadership or gain, experience from, learning from others. And then there's also just, really wanting to get very close to the MoveWorks product. We're a SaaS product. So really understanding, what MoveWorks is and where it's going, and what's our roadmap, and how can they influence the roadmap, because they all want to influence the roadmap. How they can influence that and really get more ingrained with our product process and what's ahead.
Awesome. I'm going to get the same information from YouTube, but I'm going to ask one last clarifying question on that. How many people are on your cab at any given time? Or do you rotate the amount of people?
Yeah, so how we have it set up right now is that we have 12. It rotates a little bit because someone's retiring and this other person just accepted, so we're still at 12. I have a pretty harsh rule, and be curious if you two agree with this, but I never want to see it go above 15. If we had, I don't know how many people are in the room.
We are at capacity if we were at 15.
Yeah, it's think about having a meaningful conversation with this many people at this table versus this entire room. And how meaningful will that conversation really be if it's this entire room, right? So I do have a strict number of 15.
Yeah, that's really great information to know. Katie, how does this show up for you? What is like, the main programming that your cab gets? Is it capped? How can people pay you to get a seat to the
I
cab?
wish. No, I'm not collecting any payments. No, completely agree with Mindy. One, with the WIFM for the customers, that was a big piece of this to start to. Why do they want to be a part of this? And let's make sure we're meeting their expectations each time we bring folks together. I think the way our cabs are working right now, because we are hybrid, we do 4 per year. 3 of them are generally virtual, and then 1 of them we'll do at our big event in person. We actually overextend our cab to its strategic customers, VPs, and CHROs. But because we're virtual, we tend to still get 70% attendance rate versus 100. So that's why we overextend a little bit. But it's worked well, and I agree with you on those conversations happen better when you have a more intimate group of people. One thing that we have been planning for but haven't done it just yet is breaking our cab into industry-specific sessions as well. Sometimes we struggle because we have some folks that say, I don't want to share my industry secrets with the other folks that are in the room, which I get. But other folks say, listen, I'm in healthcare and this person is in retail. It's not the same. We want to talk about the regulatory challenges in healthcare. So that's something that we're experimenting. I'm hoping we'll be able to pull it off at our in-person summit. But at the end of the day, folks, they want to talk to like-minded professionals, they want to learn from one another, and they want to get out their brand and share the innovative things that they're doing as an organization. And iCIMS gets a chance to say, okay, great, and by the way, we have these ideas, can we get your feedback on them? And we listen, and we show that we listen, and we make changes based off of that, and that's what's made it a really successful CAB program.
Brilliant. Thanks for walking us through all that. I'm envisioning the summit and all the different segments. Annalisa, how does it work at Filevine? Where you mentioned that your CAB members are interested in maybe similar things. Do you also cap the amount of members at any given time?
Yeah, totally. That was something I had a really hard rule on when I was pitching it to leadership is 10 to 12 was my goal. We have 10 members right now. And I did initially structure it so that people would kind of graduate out on a rolling cadence so that the older people could welcome the new members in. And that's something that I kind of grew into or was kind of baked into my school of thought because when I was with Morgan Stanley, my book of clients were privately owned enterprise companies, so I got to have little IPO graduations and shuffle them out because they were no longer under my wing there. So I do like a rotating cab as well, just because it kind of gives fresh information. You don't position yourself for your customers to get bored and for it to feel like a chore anymore. They still feel like it's fun and a privilege to be on it.
How did you curate that inaugural group of members?
Yeah, so that was really interesting and hard because one of the reasons why
the initial group, I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, one of the reasons why my CEO wanted a cab is because we had a client that said, put me on your cab. And he's not really an enterprise client. We also had a lot of top advocates, or what we call champions, who are also referral partners for us that wanted to be on it. So I kind of handpicked a list, made sure that I was aware of diversity in terms of gender, people of color, just geography diversity. I'm in legal tech, so practice areas of legal. Didn't want a board full of PI attorneys as we're trying to expand our TAM and kind of look at getting broader sets of ideas. So it was lots of Excel mapping, color coding, where are my women at, where's this, where's my geography, and then I went and roadshowed it with a lot of the senior leadership team too to kind of get yeses and nos and make sure that everybody felt okay with it as much as they could so that I wasn't going to get yelled at after the fact about like, why is this person here? Why didn't you tap that person? And then we sent out official invites and got everybody to come to the annual client conference that year too.
Wow, that sounds like such an initial success story. I love how thoughtful you were about like, you know, curating those invites and who you brought on. Katie, I wanted to, you know, jump to you now and ask you to give more details about like, you know, bouncing off what Annalisa said about curating that group of members. As you like iterated on the cabs and grew them over time, how did you select your members for your cab? Did you get, you know, the account management team, the sales teams involved to support for that? What did that look like at your company?
Yeah, so over the years, it looked different. Now we partner really closely with our Chief Customer Officer as well as our SVP over our strat accounts. And it's really a collaborative effort of, do we have the right mix of folks across the different industries that we target as an organization? And do we have the right personas? And that's been a big piece of this that we've learned over the years, which is who do we want to get this feedback from? And for those folks that maybe don't have a seat at the table for the cab, what other engagement programs can we have for them? So we do have a product experience panel, and that's not necessarily for end users, but maybe admins of our software that do want to provide feedback, that want to see the roadmap, that want to get into like the nitty gritty of what we're doing, but probably not the right setting for our advisory board, since it is more executive and more thought leadership and more bigger picture. So when we all aligned that this cab is for executive plus or VP plus, I think that helped a lot because the conversations could be at the right level versus you have a recruiter over here and an admin over here and a VP over here. So I think that was a big component of this. Who are our personas? Who are our key accounts? And while this is a cab for the business, and I feel very strongly about the entire business should be getting value from the cab, I think it goes back to one of the earlier conversations today of like, who owns the customer? I don't know, I think the Chief Customer Officer owns the customer, and so having his input into who we were inviting and why we were having them there made it more successful than in years past when we would maybe cherry pick or work with individual reps, and it became a bit more clear-cut of who was going to make it and who not based on the Chief Customer Officer.
Wow, that's great advice. Mindy, how did this show up for you, especially since you keep that customer advisory board at type 15?
Fortunately, we're a small company still, so you know we're not talking about thousands and thousands of customers to choose from at this point. But we did have a small target list. Like I said, we did start out with this very short list of sort of our founding members, where we knew we probably wanted to tap them. They'd been super engaged. You know, they'd given us a ton of feedback over time. Similarly, like looked at all the diversity of not just the individual, but also the region and the product use. If this customer's like kicking ass at all these things, and this customer's kind of struggling with these things, like let's get them to connect on the board together. So we did do a huge spreadsheet matrix, color coded craziness, and we really did hone in on I think a pretty like solid list. We also got feedback from some of the cab members. I think what you touched on, that I can't have competitors at the table with me. I might not want to participate in this if my competitor is sitting across the table with me. So
I won't be able to stay civil.
I can't talk. I can't say certain things. And if this is supposed to be an open environment, a safe space for us to give feedback, like it's going to be challenging for me. So there was some feedback like that. And one other lesson too that I learned was just that, if you invite, like, you've got some amazing customers, right? You got your Fortune 100 to Fortune 500s, and you're like, oh my God, these customers are so great. Like, let's get them. If they're not interested, like, take the cue, like, okay, great. Like, you want people who want to be at the table. Mm-hmm. You want people who want to contribute, who are leaning in, and who want to have a presence there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great advice too, and goes back to like making sure you're designing it for them and not rolling out something that's going to rub people the wrong way. I would love to hear more details on the exact like programmatic experience you all deliver. I'm curious, like how often do you have these events for your cabs? Are there ways that you communicate to them in between events? Do they stay in touch with them? Are you all pen pals? Like stuff like that. Mindy, let's just start with you, and then we can work our way, down to you again, Annalise.
Yeah, I'm gonna I'm going to respond to that in a second. I'm going to back it up for 1 minute. One thing I did just at the foundational level was I established a CAB charter. So taking that founding CAB member feedback, shopping this around, doing all of my internal, road showing, getting all my executive feedback, I drafted the CAB charter. I had our initial CAB meetings, and I incorporated a little bit of feedback there. But basically, it was it was probably 90% baked before our first CAB meeting. After that first CAB meeting, I said, I've incorporated your feedback, and now here's a CAB charter. All of you CAB members, please, comment on this, give me feedback on this. It's a 1-pager that has all of these commitments laid out. So now to go into my commitments. So quarterly meetings, I think as we're all figuring it out, is it hybrid, is it in person, is it virtual? So that's sort of, I did not commit to that on my charter. But we also do quarterly comms, but I am finding that particularly with this group, there's a desire for more. So I am committing to a little bit more than quarterly. And then, some of these commitments, on the charter include that folks are involved in certain kinds of advocacy with us. So I'm just in touch. I probably have texts from some of them right now. I'm just in touch with them. I am pen pals with them, as you said.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And are kind of equal end of them, communicating with you, are there internal stakeholders that you also have committed to a cadence to support the programming?
Yeah, absolutely. So CAB Agenda Tiger Team is my favorite Slack channel. So we're deep in Slack, Bridget. I've got my sort of core team where I'm in touch almost daily with this group as we're developing content for what's ahead, as we're reporting on what's happened. And then with my leadership stakeholders, I have another Slack channel for them, but another sort of monthly cadence, regular update with them.
Awesome. It's so great to get that full picture view. Katie, I'm dying to know what's going on over there with your CAB. How are you keeping them engaged?
I think Mindy hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of what she mentioned is really, it's the blueprint, right? It's the playbook for a CAB. I will say that one of the areas that I didn't do sooner, and I was kicking myself for not realizing it, was setting those expectations around advocacy with our CAB members. And so I don't communicate a ton with our CAB members outside of those meetings, except when I want to share opportunities for them. And that's usually my personalized outreach for them. These are our folks that are going to speak at our conference. They're going to speak at the industry conference. They're the ones that we want to showcase in editorial opportunities. And for the most part, they're also the people that want to participate in all of those things. So outside of the CAB meetings, that's really the communication that they get, technically from a member of my team now. Outside of the CAB meetings, that's how we're keeping in contact with them. The event itself, that's what it is. It's an event, right? Every time we have a CAB meeting. So there's pre, during, post, right? We have our project plan leading up to the event. Here are all the things that we need to make sure that we're doing to ensure that we have the right internal stakeholders. During it, we're recording it. We have note takers. We have polls to make sure that it's interactive. Post, we do our debrief, and we make sure that the folks that were participating internally at ISIMS got what they needed out of the CAB. We're taking those notes, and then we're disseminating them across, I'll say the organization. It's not necessarily going in a company-wide email, but for the folks that may be interested in what came out of the CAB, we're making sure that that's a part of the programmatic process.
And it sounds like, I'm curious how that's positioned, because I can imagine a world like in my company, if, we don't have a CAB yet, but if they knew, these 8 execs got together and this is what they had to say, it's like the top secret industry report. Yeah, is that how your team receives the information? Do you build an internal brand around those insights?
Yeah, it's really a part of our Voice of the Customer program, right? At the broadest scale, this is one input into our Voice of the Customer program. And don't do a CAB if you're not going to listen to what your customers have to say and act on it. Just don't do it. Don't do a survey if you're not going to read the responses and act on it. And so the biggest part of the CAB is taking that information, disseminating it, and then it doesn't end there. You have to act on it. And if you don't, then don't have a CAB. And I think that's probably been the most important thing for other folks to realize, and this is why it's not a boondoggle, because we are getting this valuable information and we're acting on it. I'll share so quickly a brief story of one of the women at Enterprise Holdings, they're the parent company for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and earlier on in our cab, we were showcasing, we were so excited, we'd been focused on talent acquisition for so long, we were gonna move into an ERP space. This was about 10 years ago. And we showcased it to our cab, and we said, you guys, we're gonna do it. We're gonna move into payroll and employee data management and all this stuff that was never in our wheelhouse. The cab members, and Marie from Enterprise in particular, said, I love you, but I'm scared, I don't like this. This means you're gonna lose your focus on talent acquisition. We're never gonna buy you for this. We want to keep you for talent. We don't want you to do ERP, so focus on talent. And honestly, we listened to her and the rest of the cab. We iced that product, AKA it never came back to life. And now the industry has kind of responded and said, talent is important, and it can't just be coupled in. Like, this deserves its own resources and its own roadmap and its own investment. And it really goes back to our cab telling us, nope, don't go in this product direction. Stay at what you're good at and continue to double down on what you know.
Wow, that's a great anecdote about like how this value of the cab comes full circle. Annalisa, how does your programming show up for your cab now that you had that inaugural group? You're able to kind of like coach different groups through, transition them. What's your secret sauce to keeping them engaged? How do you run that experience?
Yeah. So first, I think I could not do anything without my partner in crime, who's the director of product feedback.
Nice.
Yes. So
Nice.
she helps me keep a really close tie to all of the product content that we bring to the meetings, and her and I kind of tag team the agenda. With keeping people engaged post-meeting, I have a Slack group for them to connect on. It has admittedly been a little quiet, so we're launching a community pretty soon, and so I'm looking forward to transitioning that onto the community, so because people are a lot more engaged in there anyway. They don't need another Slack org to look at that they forget about. And then in meetings, I really like to, like you said, plan them like an event, because they are. So making sure that I have an in-person meeting coming up early next month. So I'm really thinking through just even the room we're gonna be in, when they're getting food, when their break is, making sure we're not sitting and talking at them the whole time, like what's the polls, but also small breakout sessions. We're having a voice of the customer, or they're called tech talks, recording session at the end of the meeting. So just different formats and like ways to engage them. So.
That's such a good like tip or takeaway. Plan all of like the interactions, like their events. Plan that agenda to make sure it's like really worth their time engaging. Would love to hear from you all around like measuring the success of your cabs. Maybe jumping back to Katie, you shared that anecdote about how that customer's feedback really influenced the roadmap and the success of your company. I imagine those are good stories to tell internally. What are some other ways that you measure and communicate the success of your cab?
Yeah, I think, there's the leading indicators of the folks that we target accept. Did they attend? Great, let's measure that and track that over time. We do like a quick CSAT, because we're primarily, virtual for these meetings right now, that pop up in Zoom at the end saying, did we meet your expectations? What topics do you want to talk about afterwards? And then more of a lagging indicator outside of a great anecdote like that. I wish I had more, where every single time we are like changing the industry. But we'll measure our cab members, and we'll do this for other things too. We'll do this for our advocates program, or we'll do this for events. And we say, are the folks that are participating in this cab program, is their NPS score higher? Are they renewing at a higher rate? Are they spending more with us? For the majority of them, yes. I remember at one point in time, I think our NPS score was something like 17 points higher if they attended an ISIMS event. And so like we take these metrics and we shout them from the rooftops, because then we get buy-in to do more of them, to invest in more cabs, and to do more with our customers. Oh, and the advocacy piece is another one. I love to be able to say, look, 10 of our cab members are speakers at this year's conference. That really helps folks not only understand the value of a cab program, in its voice of the customer arm, but also in its advocacy arm.
Awesome. That's I love the way you say it. Like having those like phrases and statements that are really impactful and critical that you can highlight is super important. Mindy, how does this show up for you and your team? What are your like go-to sparks that make people understand at your organization how important the cab experience is.
Yeah, sure. So I think, when you're going from 0 to 1, data's hard.
Yeah.
I think that it's in some ways less important when you are going from 0 to 1. I have target metrics when I think about, what I want this cab to be in just even 6 months from now that I want to start hitting. But, measuring the successes today, it's like people really enjoyed this and we got positive feedback. So there's not like super deep metrics yet. A couple things that I have seen so far that I am excited to report on is just like the influencing the roadmap, influencing product focus areas. So just even just tracking, numerically, like 4 product memos have been written since my June 1 cab meeting, right? Like that's amazing, right? So there are these like influences on the product. And then one other thing like that we're doing too that's just like sort of a little bit more tactical is that for each session, outlining the objectives on what those sessions are. So if you're looking for feedback, did you get that feedback? If this is about that, best in class, showcase, like did the customers learn from that? So kind of getting really, sort of in the nitty-gritty around feedback of each of those sessions.
That's great advice. Annalisa, how does this show up with you, especially because you work closely with that director of product? That was her, or
Yeah.
their role, right?
Yep. Mary, that's her name.
Shout out, Mary.
Yes, shout out Mary Lyon. Yeah, so I'm kind of with Mindy. It's really hard to tie it back to data at this point. We do have an MPS that's going out, but I need to build a Kevin dashboard and really
Shout out, Kevin.
Yeah, put those two together. But we are getting really great feedback on a lot of things like support. We're looking at a different support model, partner implementation, the roadmap, of course, and then I also have post-meeting surveys every time just to kind of get a pulse on things. So.
Right, incorporating those feedback loops. Well, I love that you all called that out because I think a lot of people here are in that position of being program builders, responding to the great, novel ideas that CMOs have to build a cab. You're in that position where you do have to go from 0 to 1, so knowing what story before you even start you're trying to tell is super important. So for those people who are at that point, what would your top 3 tips, top 3 takeaways, top 3 things to keep in mind, what would they be to somebody who's just starting out building a cab? Mindy, you want to take this one first?
Align. Just alignment internally, externally, what you're trying to achieve, get that charter drafted so you've got that source of truth to go back to. I think, probably borrowing from Bridget a little bit, just delivering value, and that's internally and externally. That is, it's got to be mutually beneficial. So making sure that, everyone is seeing the benefits of this, because no one's going to want to come back in the room if it's not beneficial to them. And then I think, I think I touched on this too, just like, it sounds so obvious, but get people in the room who want to be there. So making sure that they're seeing that this is a valuable thing, that this is like an opportunity for them.
Making sure that the vibes are right before people walk in and the energy's there.
Yeah. If you never ask the same person out on a date 10 times,
right? You ditch them if they're not good for you. Yep.
Take a cue. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Mindy. Katie, what would your top 3 tips, takeaways? What would they be?
Align on your objective. Find that, this is maybe 2 in 1. Align on that objective, find your executive sponsor. Number 2, don't do a cab if you're not going to listen to the feedback and act on it. And number 3, don't forget we're all marketers. This is, again, where I kick myself for not doing this sooner. These should be your speakers. These should be the folks that you're touting and shouting from the rooftops. And when you have these engagements with them, they're actually pretty willing to do it and to participate with you. So don't forget about this as an advocacy opportunity on top of all the other great value that you get from this as a part of a Voice of the Customer program.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Annalisa, what do you think? Top 3?
I wrote them down. So
oh, amazing.
So understand workload first and make sure that everybody on the leadership team is aware of that because it's a lot of work. Cabs are a ton of work. And align on the goals. And then close the feedback loop, which has already been said. I have a quick story. If I were on a cab for the Bellagio, I would give them feedback not to charge me $50 to use their mini fridge. So that happens. If you put anything in their mini fridge, they charge you $50.
Oh,
But if I were on the Bellagio side of operations, closing the feedback loop is, even if I'm not going to do anything about it, you have to acknowledge that, oh, I hear you, we're money hungry, I'm sorry. Like it's not on our roadmap right now, but just make sure you acknowledge that their feedback, whether you will execute on it or you won't. And then I think the last thing would be launch org-wide training and make that continual as well, because I don't remember what session it was, but somebody talked about educating and re-educating, I think, yes. And so just making sure that you're educating everybody and getting the whole company involved, because it shouldn't just be a marketing or product effort, it should be an org-wide effort.
awesome.
Yeah.
I am not going to get stuck on that mini fridge thing, thinking about all the stuff in my mini fridge.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for all those, tips, takeaways. It's super actionable. We did have some questions come in, and so I'm going to read some of them that came in. Two of them, actually, this is a really good one that you'll love to tackle. Have any of you ever had to release a cab member for lack of participation? How did you go about it? And what other advice would you give to retire long-term cab members? Who wants to take this one first?
I'm happy to take it first.
Yeah, Mindy. Kick them out of the club. 15 only.
15 only. I run a tight ship. Go back to your charter.
Yes.
Your charter says you must attend, you're allowed to miss one cab meeting per year. So you miss more than one, there you go. It's like, yes. So yes, I've had to tell people that they're no longer involved.
So you send like an email communication and...
Given this level, it is a conversation, but just pointing back to the charter as that source of truth.
Yeah, that's great advice. Katie, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I ask the account managers to do it for the most part, since these are some expensive relationships, and we let the customer make the decision, right? We say, hey, it looks like you've been really focused on XYZ big project. You haven't been able to make the cab meetings. You want to revisit this next year? Is now not the right time? And usually people want that option to bow out, and they'll do so gracefully. I don't necessarily kick longtime cab members out. Marie, who told us to ice our ERP system, she's still in the cab. She's great. I love her as a member of our cab. But over the years, we look for different opportunities to engage folks that have maybe stopped participating or something like that. But I don't necessarily retire folks from the cab if they're an active iCIMS customer and they're providing a lot of value.
Got it. Annalisa, how does this show up for you? Have you ever had to have a difficult conversation?
Not at FileVine yet. When I did roll out my first list of customers, somebody agreed to it and then just kind of ghosted after, so he opted out. But I think it's just being really clear about your expectations up front. I did set in front of them, here's what's expected, attending every meeting. I forgot what else I was going to say, but I have had I am a little bit softer. I don't kick people out if they've missed one. But my core audience, my core audience
It's two for
are
Mindy, but then you're done.
attorneys. So
Sorry.
they all say, hey, I had a trial that popped up, and I'm like, okay, I can't do that. But yeah, I like the approach of talking to people as well and kind of guiding them into that conversation. Like, I see you haven't really been engaged here. We haven't seen you at these last 2 meetings. Are you still feeling like this is a commitment you want to make?
I'm going to combine 2 of the questions that came in to build off of that. So somebody asked, we're having trouble keeping people engaged between those sessions, being, communicative and responsive. And I'm sure, ways to overcome that challenge could help, cab members be able to attend meetings and stay more engaged. How do you navigate that? What are some things that have worked really well in terms of keeping people engaged and responsive?
Yeah, that's a hard one. That's something that I was struggling with this one right now. They asked for a Slack group, and I try and keep them engaged and post questions, content in there, and it's just kind of crickets. So I haven't gotten much there, but I'm hoping the community will help with that. Some other things that I've done in the past are just fun activities outside of the actual cab. We did like a virtual wine tasting. So just kind of building that little mini community with and relationship with the cab members.
Right. Somebody mentioned the way that they structured that with engagement was around the 80-20 rule. So I guess
Yeah.
this means like, 80% of like engagements and conversations are driven by the cab
Yep.
themselves.
Yep.
So good idea to do fun activities. Katie, Mindy, anything, that's worked specifically really well for you all.
We've done some surprise and delight, especially while we're all virtual. We'll send them just like some some cab specific swag and thank you notes. I think part of the beauty of having our Chief Customer Officer as the executive sponsor, as well as being in really tight partnership with our SVP of Strat Accounts, is that they also own those relationships too. And so it may not be a touch point from me or from a team member outside of the cab meetings, but you bet that the Strat VP is in touch with these folks and the Chief Customer Officer is in touch with these folks. And sometimes we'll ask them to send the invite, or we'll ask them to reinforce attendance or things like that, because these are the folks that they're talking with on an ongoing basis. So it may not always be my team's role to keep that engagement throughout, but I know that I have a strong community of other internal folks that want to see this cab successful, and so they'll do the outreach as well.
Awesome. How about you, Mindy?
Yeah, I think, everything you said resonates. I think just like one other sort of pro tip I would suggest is, these folks are in the room because they want to feel special. So what are some ways that you might make them feel special and do so meaningfully? And so, giving them like the scoop on stuff.
We love a
Right?
scoop. We love a
Yeah,
scoop.
We love a scoop. Like, give them the scoop on something, like you're the first to know about this upcoming thing. Give them an opportunity to weigh in on that scoop. Like, engage them in that way so they feel like they're being invited to the table and have a say in it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thanks for sharing that. Our other two questions will wind down now. Somebody asked, is advocacy, Katie, you mentioned it's certainly a benefit of people who join the CAB membership or the CAB board, but is it an expectation? And have you all ever encountered your product teams pushing back on this? This person is coming from a place where, the product team wants to keep the ask separate, like church and state, keep it separate. Has this come up for any of you all?
Yes, all the time. I think I've seen our CTO get defensive with cab members, for better or for worse. Now, it usually gets smoothed over some drinks after the cab when we were in person, so that has helped. But not everyone is an advocate when they join the cab, and we don't want it that way either. We want folks to be honest despite where they are in their journey. Obviously, we all want happy customers, but honestly, this is a great opportunity to win them over. The other group that I talked about before, that product experience panel, that's for more users of the system, that's a great place to send people who are actually not super happy. Because we'll take their feedback. If it's product driven, we'll take their feedback. We'll listen. We'll let them be a part of the testing process, the roadmap building process, the UI development, and that actually helps turn a lot of relationships around. So I don't think you have to be an advocate to be a part of a CAB or advisory panel, but it does feel great when you can take those non-believers and turn them into believers after they've participated.
Yeah, I'm loving this theme of customer advocates and customer marketers being able to serve those detractors too, having a pathway for somebody who's at like negative 100 to go to 0 and then 100. I think it's really thoughtful, and I could imagine product teams might feel resistance if you're sending all of like the cranky people their way, but what you described is a really great like way to coach your internal stakeholders and support them by giving the healthy mindset to the customer to like show up and be productive and channel their energy and like really, their commitment to making the product even better. So that's a really great explanation. Thank you. Annalisa, anything you would add when it comes to like working with product teams who are pushing back on the CAB asks?
I haven't experienced that. We all had promoters because it was net new, but I think that's an interesting idea. I think the only thing that I would see that would be hard about that is if somebody's mad, asking them to come to quarterly meetings is a lot. So it might be interesting to see how you could position that to get them to agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. We have one more question. So just, whatever you all think as we wind down here. The last question is around how you collaborate with peers in marketing, customer success, even advocacy, if the CAB doesn't fall under that, to align on all the customer touch points at play. Any thoughts here? Anybody want to kind of share how you keep that all organized? Charter was the move.
Charter, always go back to the charter.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I feel really lucky with like the executive sponsorship that I have, and then, how I was able to identify like my key stakeholders. So I'm in, lockstep with my head of product marketing, who I report into, my head of product, my head of customer success, and my head of customer success operations. So that's my Cab Agenda Tiger team. And that to me is just like a lovely little recipe for success, because you're getting all of these really important, touch points and feedback with people who are invested in the cab. Like seeing some of these moments, like, when you have those really proud, like, marketing moments, you're like, oh my gosh, all the light bulbs are going off in the room at the same time. Like, everyone's like having their aha moments. And I really saw that happen with my, with a couple of those folks on that Tiger team. And so I think they're like, okay, when's our next cab? Like, they're now leaning, they're sold.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you both for, or all of you, all three of you, for sharing all these wonderful tips. How many people feel more confident if they had to launch a cab tomorrow? Yep. Okay, great. Good to hear that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.